Please don't forget the money, man.
All my blessings, 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 all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny, daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty.
Hang on to your seat warmers. It's the MichalWelch podcast, and it's getting cold outside. You know, we were set up for a great week in college football, and not that it wasn't, but not a whole lot of action really happened as far as a big national shakeup. As we walk through a recap here of some of our big games, Georgia, the Bully Dogs, who I have as number one here. Of course, they're not ranked number one. However, they beat the life out of the Ole Miss Runnin' Rebels, 52-17, 14 points in the first, second, and fourth quarter, 10 points in the third. It just never let up. It was a bloody bath there in Savannah, Georgia, as they just took the Runnin' Rebels to task. Unfortunately, it was return of Brock Bowers, the tight end, coming back from injury, playing very well. Only one touchdown, 3 modest catches. Well, I mean, we were clearing benches by the second half here. Carson Beck, 18 for 25, with 3 of 6, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Over 12 yards per passing attempt against a good Rebels team. Like a good, as far as like a top 25 team, top 20 team, again, because we can say a lot of these teams are not as good as the record indicates, or not as good as the ranking indicates, but still, what we're really doing is just parceling out what tier these teams should go in. Ole Miss is still a top 20 team nationally. They're just not anywhere near the same level as the Georgia Bulldogs. Also, 300 yards on the ground. Kendall Milton was averaging 14 yards a carry on 9 grabs. That's 127 yards, a couple touchdowns, a couple for Juwan Edwards, almost 5 yards per carry. Roderick Robinson had a couple carries as well, and got the backup quarterback in as well. Just not a lot of resistance here by Ole Miss, who no tackles for losses, no sacks. Again, forced 1 turnover. 6.6 yards per toss for Jackson Dart. They did put 179 up on the ground, but Judson was held to 3.4 yards per carry and 22 totes. He had a couple touchdowns. Spencer Sanders got in the game here for a little bit, had a few tosses of the old leather skin there, and just not much else to say about this one. Georgia establishing itself as the top program right now based on the way it's beating decent programs here in college football. Michigan, how about the old Michigan Wolverines playing their first decent, I hate to say decent team, the highest level competition they've had all season. 24-15 was the final. Damn late touchdown by Penn State really screwed a parlay for me. But anyways, J.J. McCarthy, a whopping 7 for 8 passing for 60 yards as the Wolverines run the ball 46 times and just devastate Penn State, who gave up over 400 yards rushing last year. It was a modest 220 plus this time, but they could not stop Michigan, who just said, you know what, we're just not going to throw it on you guys. We're just going to cram it up your, you know what. And that was about the ball game, to be honest with you. Drew Aller sucked again. It'd be nice to have another quality quarterback there in the Big Ten. But he's 10 for 22 for 70 yards and a touchdown late there, and just a whole lot of nothing. Katran Allen, 12 carries for 72 yards. That's 6 yards a pop. Drew Aller, the other great running back there, 10 carries for 49. That's 4.9 yards a carry and a touchdown. Nicholas Singleton, 13 for 43. That was 3.3. But 164 yards on 35 carries total. They have backs there. The quarterback, it'd be nice if he figured it out. We had a firing of the offensive coordinator immediately following this game. And just tough. They got after Michigan quite a bit there. The defense is still a solid group there. But man, this team is still very much a notch below Ohio State and Michigan, as it very much always has been. And that's just the pecking order there. They're far from breaking through still, which is too bad. It'd be nice to have a nice offseason with another fresh offensive coordinator in there for Drew Aller. And let's hope Penn State is a little bit more competitive, simply to have better football product on the field next season with Penn State and Drew Aller. But this is just a blah team right now. But again, J.J. McCarthy didn't have to show much on this one. This is going to look, I think, like last season, running through Penn State as they did last year. And we'll see if Ohio State will allow J.J. McCarthy to start to throw the ball and get unleashed on them. The template is there. So let's roll to the Ohio State Buckeyes here. 38-3 against Michigan State, officially knocking in the 3-7 bowl elimination, unless we get 5-7 teams in again, but should be officially bowl eliminated for our purposes of this program. They put up 35 points in the first half and took a nap. That's about it. I'm pretty sure they were outside with the tailgaters after that, grilling hot dogs for the second half, and that was about it. Travion Henderson, 13 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown in his limited time there. All the backs got involved. A couple quarterbacks got involved. McCord was 24 for 31 for 335 and 3 touchdowns. Got the ball downfield a bit. Marvin Harrison was 7 for 149 and 2 touchdowns. That's over 21 yards per grab. Stover, 7 grabs for 79 yards and a touchdown as well. And just a great job by Ohio State, completely blanketing just a team that put a football squad on the turf. Let's just say that. Not much to see here. Next up, we have Florida State, a team that was possibly in danger here in the late window. 27-20. Miami had an opportunity here after a real up and down season that was certainly an improvement at this point from last year, but they're now 2-4 in conference play, 6-4 overall. They will go bowling this season, making steps here. Florida State, though, again, playing some teams closer than they appear here, especially on the road, but they're at home for this one. Jordan Travis, 19 for 31, 265 and a touchdown, just under 100 yards on the ground. The offense just wasn't very productive here. We had Coleman making a big touchdown catch, but he wasn't super productive overall. 4 catches for 24 yards. The defense had to get involved here. 8 pass breakups was the accredited number here. 7 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. We had 9 tackles for loss and 3 sacks on the other side for the Miami defense. Tyler Van Dyke was 2 for 7 for 29 yards and a pick. And the backup, Emory Williams, was 8 for 23 for 175. He managed 2 touchdowns on those 8 completions after 23 tosses, and that was just a miserable time there. Both quarterbacks were banged up in this football game. Emory, freshman, came in because Tyler was hurt, his arm, I believe. Then Emory had an arm issue as well at the very end of this game. Unfortunate. Could that have changed the result? Possibly. But the fact of the matter is, much like the NFL, we got a lot of backup quarterbacks in here. Poor play all the way around, and just garbage. Just a lot of garbage going on here. George, 5 catches for 153 and 2 touchdowns. That's over 30 yards per reception with some great plays there. He had a big 85-yard grab, and they did put up over 130 yards rushing. So the Canes, altogether, in their lost 2 quarterbacks and put up more yardage than Florida State did have a killer turnover in there. Still managed to rush for a few more yards, but Florida State was just not very good in here. A combined 7 for 28 on third downs were these 2 teams. Just a miserable offensive game. But Florida State survives again. This will go as a nice win on the resume. I still think there's a piece missing here, and Jordan Travis's quarterback play really bothers me sometimes. I still think he's missing some juice there, something. Washington, 35-28 over Utah, who was in the mix here. Washington was able to get a steady hand here in the second half. They were down 28-24 at the half. They gave up 21 points in the second quarter. They gave up nothing in the second half at all. 11 points coming in the third for them. Nothing happened in the fourth at all, and they managed to win this one. They did have more yardage than Utah, as to be expected. Utah actually averaged more yards per pass, almost a full yard more at 8.9 than Washington, who had, in the penalties this game, 20 penalties total, 97 yards for Utah, 100 yards for Washington, 3 turnovers between the two teams. Bison Barnes did move the ball a little bit, 17 for 30 for 267, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks for Utah, who also put over 100 yards and a couple touchdowns on the ground. Michael Penix, 24 for 42, 332, and 2 touchdowns. Over 100 yards, 120 yards on the ground as well, although that wasn't the most efficient way for them to move the ball. Dylan Johnson, though, over 100 yards again and a touchdown, 4.5 yards per carry, as he's been an effective weapon at that position. And the big receivers, Adzuni, I never pronounced that right, but 3 catches for 111 and 2 touchdowns was the most productive, and they did damage there. But again, the defense, 0 sacks on the game, and allowed Utah to stay in this one with their putrid offense and their third-string quarterback, who's officially going to, be their starter, as he's going to end up starting about 8 games in this. So as far as recap purposes, looking back and reflecting on the season, he will be considered the main starting guy there, Bryson Barnes. But still, Washington's got problems too. And it's starting to look like certainly Georgia and Michigan as the kind of top tier type of teams at the moment. Oregon takes down USC 36-27. It was a bit more of a struggle. It was right, they didn't cover the line, which was right around 15-14. It was moving around a little bit, but Oregon does manage to come out ahead. Let's start with Caleb Williams, 19 for 34, 291 yards and a touchdown. He does rush a touchdown in as well, but negative yards on the ground overall. Not going to help him out. Just not a whole lot going from the offense there, and the defense, just not much either. Just enough Caleb Williams to get a few points on the board there. 13 in the fourth quarter, almost half their score. Oregon was able to keep it consistent throughout. 4 total touchdowns from Bo Nix, over 400 yards. Bucky Irving, the top quarterback there, running back there, over 115 yards as well in the touchdown. And Tez Johnson, 7 grabs, 126 and 2 touchdowns. Troy Franklin, 2 touchdowns. No, 1 touchdown, 2 grabs, 147 yards. He had a big one for 84. Just big plays, and no stopping for USC. 3 sacks, 5 tackles for loss. The defense was all over it, as expected. And Oregon doesn't cover, but they do a good job of taking down USC, who falls to 7-4 overall. Texas 29-26 over TCU. The big news out of here was after Brooks, the running back here, Jonathan Brooks, put up 2 touchdowns and 104 yards on 21 carries, is injured, and he's out for the rest of the season. The margin here between him and some of the backups here, Baxter, Red, if he's involved, will be minor. And I assume that they'll be able to make it through the rest of the regular season, and that's probably not going to be the fine edge that can cost them. They're at Iowa State, home against Texas Tech. If they lose either of those games, I don't expect the running back to be the difference there. However, in saying that, Ewy Ewers was back, 22 for 33, 317, a touchdown and a pick. Not exactly spectacular offense from him. Xavier Worthy had 10 of those 22 balls for 137 yards. The defense got after TCU, who was in the mix. 20 points, 20 of the 26 points for the Horned Frogs came in the fourth quarter to get them right back in the game. Another one, just like Kansas State, where the team gets right back after Texas, whose defense was supposed to be remarkably different this year. And all of a sudden, they're letting teams get back in the ass end of these games and making it very interesting. Josh Hoover has been in there at quarterback for TCU for a moment now. 24 for 36, 302, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Less than, or about 100 yards, 100 plus, just over 100 yards total on the ground. And team just kind of shot itself in the foot here. Overall, we had Texas with 482 yards of offense, over 100 more than TCU. Turnovers hurt the Horny Frogs in the end, though. And just Texas, again, got a few flaws in the ointment here. Alabama, however, the team, of course, that Texas beat earlier in the season to move to such a high stature in everyone's thought process and evaluation. is 49-21 victors over the Kentucky Wildcats as they domesticated the home team there. Joe Milton, 234 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. Didn't run for it all this week. However, he did put up 36 yards and 3 more on the ground. Did I say Milton? Milrow. There we go. I got it. I got the names things down. Don't worry. 6 total touchdowns. They're playing within him. He's not being forced to do anything crazy throwing the football. A modest 22 passing attempts, double-digit yards, passing it downfield, 10.6. That's what he does, those deeper shots. Kobe Patience, 4 catches for 74 yards and a touchdown, but it was spread out. 3 different guys caught balls. They were able to run the ball a little bit this time. Justice Haynes, of course, McClellan, Rodney Williams, but we were splitting the carries a little bit among the boys here. And Alabama suddenly has an offense here. And Kentucky just sucked. 253 yards to 444 for Alabama. The Tide, still 2 turnovers, 6 penalties. It's a little bit more than you'd like to see from them, but the offense, 7 for 11 overall, and they just beat down on Kentucky. The turnovers from Alabama helped lead to some of those scores, which is why you don't see, Alabama pitching no-hitters like the great defenses sometimes do, but they certainly have that potential if they can clean that up a little bit. Then you'd be looking at a team that's just completely bludgeoning people closer to a more dominant, 52-7 type score that you're used to seeing from former Alabama teams. And this is a dangerous squad, very dangerous team. They got their cupcake this upcoming week against Chattanooga. They've got Auburn left, and they're already locked in to Georgia in the SEC championship game. Keep an eye on that puppy right there. That'll be, like most championship weekends, the most exciting game on the slate. That's already slated. That's December 2nd, 4 o'clock on CBS. There you go. Already got that puppy locked in. Next up, we have, let's go the Tennessee Vols. They're ranked 13th, playing at number 14, Missouri at the time. Mizzou beat the life out of them. It was 0-0 after the first quarter. Mizzou said, well, we can start playing a little ball now. We're not going to let what happened at Georgia damper our temperament here. And then they just damaged the Vols' soul here. 36-7. Brady Cook, a modest 18 for 24. Touchdown, a pick. Cody Schrader, 200-plus yards on the ground, 30-plus carries, almost 6 yards per tote. Crushed them on the ground, where they were doing pretty well there, the Vols were. The defense didn't do anything particularly special. They just limited the damage that the Vols did. Less than 4 yards per carry. Milton was 22 for 34 for 267 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. The Vols defense had 3 sacks, 8 hits for losses. But just the scoreboard, man, 36-7 was the difference here. The yardage was comparable. The total yardage on the ground definitely leaned Missouri's way, and the passing yardage, the big skewing, the big difference was when they had the ball. They were efficient with it. The Mizzou Tigers were 11 for 17 on third down. Tennessee was 5 for 13. Not good, but not as bad as some of the other totals the losing teams are rattled off. However, 9 penalties and 3 turnovers just absolutely killed them. Mizzou looking really strong. Really strong. Certainly one of the best teams in the SEC. You have Georgia, you have Alabama. Jaden Daniels with LSU certainly up there. The defense is a problem. Missouri's legitimately an argument could be made that Missouri is one of the 10 best teams in college football right now. They have the ability to run the ball. They have a real quarterback in there, and they have defense. So, what else are you looking for? Mizzou Tigers. Oklahoma, ranked 17th, 59-20 over West Virginia, the Mountaineers. This was simply an outclassing. West Virginia's done a great job poking around, forcing turnovers in the secondary. Particularly, there was a stat tweeted out. One of the fellows on the Cover 3 podcast there by CBS, Bud Elliott, I believe, tweeted out the percentage of throws intercepted, I believe, downfield by teams this season. And West Virginia, I believe, was in that top spot heading into the weekend. Did not happen against Oklahoma. Dylan Gabriel, 23 for 36, 423 yards and 5 interceptions. Pushed the ball downfield. Drake Stoops caught 10 of them for 3 touchdowns and 164 yards, and they absolutely annihilated West Virginia. Not much else to say on this one in particular. The defense still has some problems, most certainly, but the offense is still clicking on a lot of cylinders. This could still be a very dangerous team, and Texas isn't necessarily walking away with a Big 12 championship should they play Oklahoma again in that game. The reason they might is because Oklahoma State, who was a clear second place just a week ago, fell 45-3 at UCF. An offense that's still clicking, clearly. Oklahoma State showed up, forgot to bring their uniforms, and got absolutely annihilated there. UCF, of course, a team that can really click on the offensive side of the football, but they've been completely outscored. Worst team in college football entering the weekend as far as points given up on the back end of the game. Well, they gave up 3 in the second half, and that was it, the entire game against the Cowboys. Plumlee, 11 for 18, 299, and 3 touchdowns, another 74 yards on the ground from him. R.J. Harvey at 24 carries for 206 and 3 touchdowns. They held the ball 10 minutes, almost 10 full minutes longer than the Cowboys. They converted on 50% of third downs versus 2 for 12 total on Oklahoma State, and they rolled up over 300 more yards of total offense, averaged 10 more yards per passing attempt and 3 more yards per rush, and forced 4 turnovers versus 1 given up against Oklahoma State, and just won in pretty much every way really possible. So that happens. Kansas, still without their Jaden Daniels, then proceeded to lose Jason Bean, who has his own issues at quarterback and tries really hard to lose games sometimes. But especially when he goes down, are you in trouble? Because Cole Ballard came in, and he was 9 for 20 for 124 and a pick, the third stringer there, and that was not good news for Kansas. Devin Neal, the trusty running back, had 7 yards per carry, 7.2 actually, for 137 yards and a touchdown as well, and it's just not enough for Kansas. The defense did an all right job keeping Bronan Morton in check for the Texas Red Raiders, who's again like the third quarterback for them, but he's got more starts than anybody between this year and last season. And it was just some early scores by Texas Tech. 10 of their 16 points came early. All 13 of Kansas's points came in the fourth quarter. So you could have taken a nice hour-and-a-half nap during the whole middle of this game and not missed a whole lot. The Jayhawks are still 7 for 15 on third down. Texas Tech is 4 for 14, which is not great, but they're 2 for 2 on fourth, a team, of course, that goes for it quite a bit, which always keeps them interesting in these particular games. And this was really a snoozer, but an unfortunate loss for Kansas that relies on their first-string quarterback and has been surviving with their second, who went down in this one. LSU, 52-35 over Florida. And, of course, LSU ranked 19th at the time. Jaden Daniels managed to clear concussion protocol after huge concerns last week while he was smacked out in the Alabama game. But hey, he played in this one. 372 yards passing, 234 yards rushing, over 600 yards. 600 yards of total offense and 5 total touchdowns. And this man, as some conversations are being had, should be in the Heisman conversation. Should probably be the leader in that conversation right now. Of course, somehow the definition of what it means to be the best player in college football is up for debate, and it's often given to the best player on the best team, but that does not necessarily mean he is the best player in college football. That might be this quarterback here, which is leading a team that might finish with 8, maybe 9 wins after a bowl game, maybe even more than that. Let's see. The remaining schedule here for LSU includes Georgia State next week at home and then Texas A&M at home with no Jimbo Fisher. Possibly 2 wins there and a bowl game. We're talking possibly 10 wins, maybe 9 for the LSU Tigers here. And what would they be without him? Would they be bowling at all? They started, I think, 3 freshmen at the corner positions. Rough going for LSU. Perhaps he is the best player in college football. Kansas State shells Baylor 59-25. The Bears should not go bowling. Kansas State barely holding on to a top 25 ranking here, so they will move up. Will Howard had 3 touchdowns, 235 yards passing. Just a solid effort here by this squad. Defense played a good job as well, despite giving up 25 points. Blake Shappen, 253 yards, 4 touchdowns. Don't hear from him a whole lot anymore. The yardage was not great in how it was obtained. 5.6 yards per pass. Had to do his best to kind of move the ball here. Threw a horrible pick 6 to help inflate the score. 4 touchdowns there, though. Fumble City. He dropped one. Guys were dropped 3 fumbles in the game, just dropping them all over. Just, Christmas came early, and just a tough loss there for Baylor. Tulane, what did I tell you? I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, but still. Tulane survives at home. Another one, 24-22 to Tulsa. Does not bode well for their upcoming matchup with UTSA. Are we sure they're going to win the American? Tulsa converted more third downs. They had over 100 more yards of offense, and they could have very much had a chance to win this game. 2 more yards average per pass. And they just couldn't quite pull this one down. Just going to be dangerous for Tulane for the remainder of the ride. They now have a touchdown win over North Texas, a 2-point win over Rice, a 3-point win over East Carolina, a 2-point win over Tulsa. They play at Florida Atlantic this week. For Atlanta trying to make a bowl game now, and then end with that home game against UTSA. Memphis, by the way, has entered the hunt here for the American Conference. Tulane 6-0, SMU 6-0, UTSA 6-0, Memphis 5-1. Everyone else is 500 or worse in the American. So the bottom section is very rough, but those 4 are teams all in the mix. And Tulane, the front runner, is looking very, very vulnerable. Arizona 34-31. They did beat Colorado. Didn't get to see this one. It was on the stupid Pac-12 network. Sanders 262 and 2 more touchdowns to add to the board, but this team has to survive this week and the following to go to a bowl game. What did you bet on their over-under? They're sitting at 4-6. They still can't run the football. Sanders hit another one on the ground and a few yards there. Just not a great team. Noah Fifta, 2 touchdowns, 214 in this one. Just a modest game from just a modest guy there. But good job by Arizona. The defense is really coming around. And this was a high-powered Colorado offense, of course. But they held them to 0 points in the 4th quarter. Managed to put 10 on the board in crunch time here. Great job. 7-3, and they have an opportunity to put more wins on the board. Utah is going to be a tough one, and that game's on the Pac-12 network. However, they finish against Arizona State, and of course, we'll have a bowl game on the tail end. Arizona State, man, the Wildcats stock just goes up and up. Louisville survives Virginia on our Thursday night game, 31-24. A high-scoring second half. 17 points by Louisville in the 4th, 24, all 24 coming from Virginia there, and they managed to put a 73-yard touchdown on the board at the end in order to seal it up. Do the Cards there at home. Just trying to make it through, man. Virginia, though, seems to have a good staff finally in place there. Despite being 2-8 and maybe not winning a game the rest of the way, they seem to have a real put together squad there. They're starting a freshman quarterback, if I'm not mistaken, still. Yeah. Anthony can't pronounce that. But the great staff in place there, and a team that looks like they're going to be able to do some things moving forward. Anthony had 314 yards passing, 89 yards on the ground, had the ball quite a bit, 31 passes, 14 carries, and has the ability to do some things if he continues to be the quarterback there. Louisville wasn't particularly impressive in anything that they really did. The defense did a good job, 4 sacks, 9 tackles for losses, and but they still had Virginia in the mix there. Virginia played Miami within 3 points, if you remember. This game was within a touchdown. NC State was within 3 points. Boston College was within 3 points. James Madison was within 1 point. Of course, the wins over North Carolina and William and Mary, which they were trailing for a while there. They have Duke and Virginia Tech at home still, 2 teams in the mix there. Duke's bowl eligible. Virginia Tech's trying to get there. But hey, keep an eye on Virginia to do some damage in the last couple of games. These are their bowl games right now, the end of the season here. Oregon State punched out Stanford 62-17. Oregon State's up to number 12 in the rankings right now. They haven't revealed a new poll yet as I'm recording this, and as you'll probably be listening to it, that's okay. They'll be moving up probably in that case. Ungalele hasn't been awesome this year. But he's also been modest. He didn't even pass 20 times in this one, 240 and 2 touchdowns. He's still an improvement over the quarterback play last year. I don't know, what they have, 30 picks between the quarterbacks last year? It was not good. The ground game got it done here. Damian Martinez, 15 carries, 146 yards, that's 9.7 per pop, and 4 touchdowns as they put up over 270 yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. That's wild. Altogether, offensively, Oregon State had 598 yards of offense to 324 for the Stanford Cardinals, who also turned the ball over 4 times. That's a -4 turnover differential there. Austin Daniels, 10 for 16, 200 yards, 12.5. So he's pushing the ball downfield. A touchdown, 3 picks, unfortunately. It still came out to like a 75.8 QBR per ESPN stats, which is good. That is a good number. 9 carries for 37 yards. That's 4 yards a carry and a touchdown. I'm just trying to keep a light on for a promising quarterback on a garbage team. Austin Daniels there on Stanford. North Carolina, at an expectedly close battle, wins in double overtime over Duke, 47-45. That's what it was. A failed 2-point conversion, which is required against Duke. They weren't able to get it there. The fourth quarter, though, there were 39 points scored in this one in order to push to the overtime limit originally. Just a great game here. Again, a rivalry game always goes down to the wire here. Drake May, 342 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. The running back Hampton, 169 yards and a touchdown. Was a great contributor in that instance. May did have 2 touchdowns on the ground that he was able to sneak in there that really contributed. And backups again for Duke. Second and third backup here. Grayson Loftus, 16 for 28 for 189 and 3 touchdowns. And just trying to scrape by there. Doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, honestly, for North Carolina. Duke's obviously one of the best coached teams in the country right now, but they had 160 yards less than North Carolina and no turnovers, and I just couldn't quite get it done, but still we're right in the mix there for a triple overtime had they got the 2-point conversion. The last one here is Iowa winning 22-0 over Rutgers. Managed to put up a whole boatload of yardage in this one, baby. The final edge here was 402 for Iowa and 127 for Rutgers in just a crazy game. Yeah. 0 penalties for Iowa. 9 for 18 on third down. There you go. 2 for 2 on fourth. Crazy for Iowa. For those that want to know because they didn't watch this trash. The Big Ten West Division right now has Iowa at 8-2 overall, 5-2 in conference play. Sitting, they'll be in the championship. Purdue's 2-5, 3-7 at the bottom. And then Northwestern, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Minnesota are all 5-5 overall and 3-4 in conference play. 5 of the 7 teams have the identical record in this gross conference division. Just disgusting. Okay, so the poll has just dropped here, the top 25 poll. So I'd like to give my quick top 15 here because, of course, the AP poll just can't be trusted here. Top 15. Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Florida State, Washington, your undefeateds, followed by Oregon, Texas, Alabama, Louisville, your 1-loss teams. Oregon State rounds out the top 10, and those are the first shifts. Top 9 didn't change at all. Missouri's number 11, then Penn State, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, and LSU at number 15. Couple rises and falls in there, just Ole Miss and Penn State falling down, the rest moving up. Utah fell down there at 16. Tulane, James Madison, Arizona, and Notre Dame on a bye round out the top 20, moving up a few slots. Tennessee dropped 7 to 21. Then we have North Carolina, Kansas State hopping in after not being ranked last week. Oklahoma State dropping 9 spots, and then Liberty hopping in at number 25. The first time in, no, they stayed the same, but the second week in, for this year. Kansas was the only one dropping out. Iowa, Kansas, Toledo, Fresno, USC, SMU, UNLV, NC State, Texas A&M, Miami of Ohio receiving votes here. So my top 15 at a quick glance here. I have Georgia, Michigan, Oregon, Washington, Texas as my top 5. Georgia, no surprise. Great on both sides of the football. Good quarterback. Defense, not quite the same as last year. Georgia's no surprise, though. They're beating the good teams on their schedule now. Michigan played a good opponent. They obviously put their team into park for the second half of these games, but they still look like the top team in the country besides Georgia to me. Oregon, again, great on both sides of the football. Top 10 offense, defense, a lot of statistical categories, top 5, and a lot of aspects as well. And outside of that Washington loss, still looks like a good football team. I'd love to be a contrarian to say that Washington should still be ranked above them, but the defense seems to have some issues. Not sure if Penix is having problems. The run game is ranked in the hundreds for some reason, despite having a good running back in Dillinger there. Not quite sure, but the problem is getting him going there. And of course, some of these stats are obviously an accumulation of the season, and some of these trends have changed. But Washington not quite the same, but when you're really good at something like that passing attack, sometimes that's enough to carry you quite a ways. Texas is my number 5 then, and they still seem to have some issues to me. They still give up some points. The defensive line is still a strength. Ewers is back again, but doesn't always have the dominant games you like to see like he did against Alabama. If you look back against Texas' schedule again this year, they won by 3, of course, against TCU this past week with him back. Without him, they won by 3 against Kansas State, and that game could have continued to play out. Won by 7 against Houston, lost in that freak, ending against Oklahoma. Needed 21 points in the 4th to break a tie with Wyoming and win that one. Just not a team that's always pulling ahead. They're not top 25 in a lot of stats other than scoring, defense. Just have some questions about that. And of course, the running back going down. And we're nitpicking the very top teams here. I have Alabama number 6. You can throw away a lot of the garbage offensive statistics, not that they're dramatically improving, but now that they know what they're doing with Milroe, it makes a dramatic difference, and the defense is still one of the best in the country. That's my 6th team, great coaching staff, and we're seeing dramatic changes during the season. Number 7, I have Ohio State. Number 8, I have Florida State, the other 2 undefeateds. Again, Florida State, the schedule is just a problem to me, not blowing people out. Jordan is not even in the conversation for a Heisman. His numbers aren't really there, and they're playing games. You know, Michigan puts it in the park for the second half of almost every game they've played. Ohio State has in most of their games, and they have worse offenses than Florida State does overall. And Florida State's had to play like 6 of their 10 games to completion to make sure that they hold on and win them, even though the scoreboard sometimes says that the margin is quite different. But Pittsburgh, Wake Forest on the road, of course, they ended up blowing out Florida State, but something is just not quite the same as the others, I don't think, for Florida State. And Ohio State, I did put a mark above. They haven't been healthy all season. I don't think the quarterback position is spot on there. And number 7, and I think a lot of these teams above them could beat them. I do have LSU as my number 9 team. My first one that's out of the playoff conversation. We've kind of limited it to those 8 teams above them right now. So if you're rounding out your top 10, I have LSU 9 and Penn State 10, and you're starting to nitpick what problems you're comfortable with and picking teams to win right now. Healthy Jaden Daniels with LSU. The offense is great. Obviously, the pass defense is a big problem. Some people might have this team ranked 20th. Jaden Daniels with like the best passing offense and the number 3 running offense right now in the country is so dangerous and can drop 60 points on anyone, 50 points at least. And this is just a very, very dangerous team. For example, Penn State, when they play a great team, they turtle up and have some real problems, but all are still throwing 1 interception on the year. He's not causing problems from that instance, just in limiting what the offense could achieve on a ceiling perspective. And this is still a really good ball club, still top 5 defense overall, and they were going after Michigan pretty good. They just could not stop the run in the end of that game. And this is still a team, I think it's top 10. So 11, I have Missouri. 12, I have Louisville. 13, I have Oklahoma. 14, I have Kansas State. 15, I have Notre Dame. And a lot of toss-ups and conversations to be had after this. Missouri, again, I like them a lot. They lost to LSU by 10 in a game that they led for a good chunk of that. They just ran out of firepower at the end there. And to Georgia by 9 on the road there. And they have big wins over Kentucky on the road, Tennessee. Earlier in the season, they beat Memphis, who could win 10 games this year, and Kansas State. That is a good team. They have a top 25 passing offense. They're at least top 30 in points scored. The defense staying along at top 50 as far as points allowed. Rushing offense is having some problems, but this is still like a good team. This is still a good football team overall, and they could, move to 10 wins. They got Florida and Arkansas on deck here, and this, I just think they could be a lot of other football teams on the mat. Louisville, I moved down. Again, they blanked Duke, who was first time new quarterback there. All they did was run the ball. They had a nice win over Notre Dame. We'll get to them in a minute. And they're well coached with less guys. Other than that, Virginia Tech, NC State, Boston College, Georgia Tech at this point. They play at Miami and Kentucky still. Top 30 in rushing yards, top 12 in points allowed. This is still a good team, but I got to move them down a little bit. Oklahoma is allowing 26 points per game in their last 6 games, which is different from their less than 20 points per game allowed on the season. Getting to the conference play, giving up a few more points here. And still a prolific quarterback, great offense, playmakers, still fixing up the defensive end at least a little bit, dramatically different than last season. I mean, Gabriel still has 70% completion percentage, over 3,000 yards, 25 touchdowns, 5 picks. Arguably, this team could be moved up. Kansas State is a good football team. 3 losses, 3-point loss to Missouri at the very end there on the road, 2-point loss at Oklahoma State, and a 3-point loss at Texas. Now you start to look at their wins, and you're like, okay, Central Florida, TCU, but they beat the hell out of all these teams. Baylor, TCU, Houston, Texas Tech, Central Florida, a good Troy team. And then they lost close games on the road. Very difficult. At Kansas and Iowa State, won't give them the credit that they deserve from non-major college football watchers, but they could move to 10 wins still this season. And 40 points per game, top 15 in rushing yards, top 25 in points allowed. This is a good football team. This is a good football team. And Notre Dame, who was on a bye last week. You last saw them losing to Clemson. You're like, how the hell does that happen? They were in that tough stretch there. Ohio State, at Duke, at Louisville, USC, Pitt, at Clemson, and they lost 3 of those games. The tough, very end of the game loss to Ohio State. They had that game until McCord decided to hit a few passes finally and put a drive together for the last play of the game. They beat Duke in there, lost a tough one on the road to Louisville at the back end of that stretch, hammered USC accordingly in Pitt, and then just falling apart to Clemson, and took their lumps rightfully that Sam Hartman's having problems and falling off, which he is, and having some issues there. This is still a team scoring 38 points a game, barely hanging out in the top 15 passing offense, but you think is a reliable quarterback, but to some extent good quarterback there. Right? Top 15 and points allowed. The rushing yards come down a bit, but they have Esme, who's still a good running back. The stats are going to hurt them a lot, but they've played a better slate than at least 70% of college football will. And Wake Forest and Stanford are on deck with a chance to move to 10 wins with a bowl game. You have to believe they're going to beat the life out of some people. They're just not bad at anything, or below average at anything. It's just still a good football team. And when you start to look at some of the options for top 15, and again, the poll has Oregon State at number 10, That's wonderful. Love the Beavers. Great coaching job there. They are top 15 at almost 38 points per game scored. They're top 20 in rushing. They have a real quarterback in DJ Ungalele. They can run the ball. They can play defense. That's great. Losses at Washington State and Arizona by field goal each. Big wins are Utah and UCLA. They've got Washington and Oregon to go yet. They could get absolutely eviscerated by both of those teams. Certainly a team in the running. Could be up there. Ole Miss has had its problems, but they could be in the running. Utah, offense has had a lot of problems. They rely on the defense. Tulane's, we've discussed their problems. Arizona's on the rise. North Carolina, I don't have a lot of trust in, nor Tennessee. And then you have Oklahoma State, who's been working up there. And then Iowa, Kansas, where do you go from there? So that is my top 15 at this particular moment. Georgia, Michigan, Oregon, Washington, Texas, Alabama, Ohio State, Florida State, LSU, Penn State, Missouri, Louisville, Oklahoma, Kansas State, Notre Dame. It's not just based on who they've beaten, but also how they look and how I think they'll project moving forward. Your watch guide for Week 12 once again begins on Tuesday, November 14th with some action. Bowling Green is 6-4. They're hosting the 9-1 Toledo Rockets, who are quite hot. Daquan Finn is thrown for over 2,000 yards on the season, 18 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Toledo's lead running back, Boone, has over 1,000 yards rushing and 12 touchdowns. It's a very good football team. 6-0 in the MAC. They'll be heading to the conference championship. Bowling Green already eligible to go to a bowl game, but this is one of the better MAC contests of the entire day, and Toledo will have to go on the road to play the mighty Falcons. Yes, the Falcons here. Right now, we have Miami of Ohio Redhawks in the lead in the East Division of the MAC, with Ohio behind them, tied up with the Bowling Green Falcons, so they still have a chance to win their division there, and if they'll be playing Toledo again in a few weeks, should they win that game. That's at 7 o'clock on ESPN2. At 7 o'clock on ESPNU, it'll be Northern Illinois hosting Western Michigan. Both teams hoping to make a bowl game there. They're currently sitting at 4-6, 3-3 in conference play. NIU favored by a bit at home. Toledo, by the way, is double-digit favorites. CBS Sports Network 7 o'clock game will be Eastern Michigan, 4-6, hoping for a bowl. They're hosting Akron. Eastern Michigan favored by 4 points at home there. So a few bowl bids on the line, and the best game there, Bowling Green hosting Toledo on Tuesday. Wednesday, we kind of rounded out here. We have Miami of Ohio then hosting Buffalo, who's already bowl ineligible. They're 3-7. That Miami team is now 8-2, favored by about 8.5 at the moment. A lot of low over-unders, of course. This one's sitting at 40. 46 for Ohio hosting Central Michigan. Ohio 7-3. Central can still make a bowl game. They're 5-5. Ohio favored by 10 points. Of course, a good team there as well. So Toledo, Bowling Green, Ohio, and Miami of Ohio still in the mix there. And that's your action for Tuesday and Wednesday. Thursday, we've got one game. Pittsburgh, they're 2-8, had a rough season, 2.5-point favorites on the road though, against 6-4 Boston College. Good thing they're already bowl eligible there. 7 o'clock ESPN. Yeah, the Falcons going on the road there, trying to win another one. They lost last week to Virginia Tech, blown out after winning 5 in a row. Wins over Virginia, Army, Georgia Tech, UConn, Syracuse. Not a great list of teams, but still really productive for this squad, who ends the season against Miami next week. This would be a nice little feather in the cap. They're not going to be favored to win whatever bowl game they appear in, so this would be a nice W. Friday, we have some interesting games. They're late, though, on Eastern time, of course. 9 o'clock ESPN2. UTSA will be hosting Florida South Florida. Now, UTSA is 20-point favorites. We got a high over-under in the high 60s. Now, UTSA still in the running for the American, of course. Tulane, SMU, UTSA still 6-0. Memphis still in the mix at 5-1, although I think they are a step behind in talent. Again, SMU does not play Tulane or UTSA at all. They can walk into the American Conference Championship. UTSA will play at Tulane next week. No one wants to slip up right now, and none of those teams certainly want to allow Memphis a chance to get back into the mix. This South Florida team, though, 2 wins last year. They're 5-5 right now. They could still make a bowl game. They probably won't do it here. They have a good, or at least a decent freshman quarterback from what I've watched. Statistically speaking, he's thrown for 18 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. He's also got another 9 touchdowns on the ground. That brings his total to 27 total touchdowns on the year. Over 2,500 yards passing, over 650 yards rushing on the ground. So he's got some wiggle to him. And it looks like a team that's on the up and up there. They can do a few things. So just might be an interesting game at 9:30. UTSA still rolling pretty strong there, though. That's at 9 o'clock. 10:30 is Washington State hosting Colorado. These teams are both 4-6 overall. They're 1-6 in the Pac-12. This is going to be a dangerous one. Washington State's favored, low 60s. Was the over-under, 4.5-point favorites. Cedar Sanders still only has 3 picks on the season, a couple fumbles though, and the loser's not going to a bowl in all likelihood with 7 losses, and the winner will still have to win again next week. So we may have 2 teams on their last legs here heading into the Thanksgiving weekend slate next week. Just big stakes, quite frankly, for both of these programs. Washington State did not quite expect to be in this position last year after a pretty good last season. Cameron Ward returning for year number 2 here, and it's just not been a great season for him. The offense is not really picked up, and it was a struggle last season. The defense is not there. There's just problems all over the place. Ward's numbers still bear out well, 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 6 on the ground as well. But this team can't run the football, which was the same problem last year, and the defense just isn't quite there. It's just obviously not a very good football team. And we all know the problems that Colorado is suffering. They have a quarterback, a great guy in Hunter there as well at the skill positions, I should say. But a lot of struggles. So that'll be a late night Friday game. And by the time we hit Saturday morning, Colorado officially missing a bowl game could be one of the lead headlines as they're preparing you for your Saturday games on the talk shows. Heading into your Saturday slate then, your top watch. You have 15 games in the noon window, 7 ranked teams. Your top watch I have Miami hosting Louisville, the Cards. Currently ranked 11th in the new poll. Miami, of course, 6-4 right now, 2-4 in ACC play. They're just finishing out the season. They got no big stakes right now, just trying to finish strong here. Van Dyke, I'm not sure if he'll be back in the fold here. This team's now lost 2 straight, both road games. 20-6 at NC State, of course, and 27-20 at Florida State last week. They've lost 4 of 6 total, and in those wins, they survived Virginia by 3 and Clemson by 8. It's just not a great showing at this particular point, and they're not really great at anything. So it'll certainly be a struggle for Miami, but not a walkover for Louisville, who is currently in position to make it to the ACC championship game. Florida State already has it locked up. Louisville's got a game lead on a combination of Virginia Tech, which is stunning, NC State, and North Carolina. And they got to hang on here. Next week they play Kentucky, who's out of conference, but they really need the Cards have actually beat both Virginia Tech and NC State, they do not play North Carolina, but they don't have this officially locked up yet, so there must be a tiebreaker in there. So they just have to win this game. Maybe North Carolina loses, but they still have a chance in here. They really need this win against Miami. They're favored by a point on the road here. Again, maybe this won't be the most exciting game. Miami's been kind of a slog, and Louisville can be at times as well, despite being a well-coached group. But I have that down as a top watch at the Eastern Time noon window for this Saturday. My channel flippers, I do have the Michigan Wolverines heading on the road to Maryland. Of course, this is the game that's going to be sandwiched between Penn State and Ohio State next week. Just a massive game on the slate, of course. But they have to survive here at Maryland. We will find out on Friday if Jim Harbaugh will be on the sidelines or not. Michigan is 19-point favorites at the moment. They found the ground game a little bit because it's been a struggle at times. And it'd be nice to see if JJ can throw the ball around. But again, we still may not see that until they absolutely have to do that. Maryland survived Nebraska last week, but it was not pretty at all. They're 6-4. They're 3-4 in the Big Ten, so they're bowl eligible certainly. But the win last week they really needed because they lost 4 games previous to that. And they're just hanging on by the skin of their teeth. It's actually been a little bit worse season than expected. Tulia hanging on, 22 touchdowns, 8 picks, 65% completion, and it's just been kind of ugly for this team, all things considered. But they can still disrupt, I think, Michigan a little bit. If the cohesiveness still isn't there on the sidelines, I think Michigan took a couple questionable timeouts with the clock running down last week, and we'll see if they stick to running the football, throwing the football. Just, we've seen some augmented play styles there, and we'll see what happens, I guess. You'd expect them to walk through Maryland. We'll see. So that'll be the big noon Fox kickoff game. Next up, I do have Penn State hosting Rutgers on here. Penn State now 8-2, of course. Rutgers 6-4 after getting blanked by Iowa in a snoozer last week. This is on FS1. Penn State 20-point favorites and a 41-point over-under. Rutgers, again, the offense, to no one's surprise, is a problem. Defense, when they are fielding a decent football team in recent memory, has been a staple, and that's no different here. Penn State has struggled at times always against better teams. Can Rutgers be disruptive here? It'd probably be more difficult if Penn State had to go to Jersey. But will something interesting happen in this game? I just have it on the list. That's the noon FS1. Memphis hosting SMU, as I just stated. SMU can't really stand to lose a game with Memphis on their heels. UTSA and Tulane in a big game next week. They don't want to lose an American Conference game at all. This is a big one. 8-2 is Memphis. 8-2 is SMU. This game will get on. This game will be on ESPN2, so it's got some prime billing there. Quite frankly, SMU's now won 6 in a row. They pounded North Texas last week 45-21. They've got Navy following that, which is it is a conference game, so you do have to survive Navy as well. Memphis has got road game to Temple next week, so this is just a big powerhouse battle. Probably looking ahead was Memphis this past weekend. They survived Charlotte by 6 points. But they did play South Florida within 9, North Texas within 3. I mean, there is a reason that they already have a loss, and they're kind of a step behind the other kind of big 3 in the conference here. The defense can be a problem. They still have a great veteran quarterback there in Seth Heineken, but this could still be a great game. The over-under right now is set at 66, and quite frankly, I would think we could have easily more points on the board than that. So keep an eye on SMU and Memphis in that noon window. Next up, I have our notable section here. Again, light noon slate. Now I have BYU hosting Oklahoma. If BYU could keep its crap together, they would certainly be a more interesting opponent for Oklahoma, which seems to be gearing up again for a nice finish to the end of the season. Perhaps seeing Oklahoma State fall last week kind of fired them up for a nice run to the Big 12 championship game. Right now, the standings look like this. Texas is, of course, in front at 6-1 in conference play. Oklahoma State Iowa State, and Kansas State are all 5-2 in conference play, with Texas Tech, Kansas, and West Virginia another step behind that. And we got almost half the conference with a losing record at 2-5 and worse at TCU, Houston, Baylor, BYU, UCF, and Cincinnati. And TCU will be on the docket next for Oklahoma. Well, Oklahoma State will have Houston and BYU. Iowa State will have two teams in Texas and Kansas State that will probably pop them right out of it. And Kansas State will, of course, then play Iowa State and at Kansas, which will make things very difficult. So we have tiebreakers in effect and all that. But Oklahoma still has a chance, certainly, to make the conference championship game. They do have to put away BYU on the road here first, and they do not want to slip up on that one. Dylan Gabriel, putting a lot of career stats on the board now, just continuing to put up great numbers, 70% completion percentage. They're 24.5 points favorites on the road here. BYU still needs one more win to become bowl eligible. Next up, we have Tulane going on the road to play Florida Atlantic. Tulane slips by, of course, again. Talked about that already. Florida Atlantic 4-6, trying to make a bowl game. This is on ESPN Plus. Tulane favored by less than 10. Of course, UTSA next week on deck. Alabama will be hosting Chattanooga. That one's on some station. You'll be watching highlights. It doesn't really matter. It's not a game that demands a whole lot of attention. Although their quarterback there, Milroe, might be able to slowly work his way into some Heisman conversation, perhaps to sit in New York, but certainly not to earn the award. It's a little bit too late for that, in my personal opinion. But he's starting to pop up on some lists now that he's found some consistent production. ESPN Plus is where this game should be, and that's where it will be. Chattanooga 7-3, a good FCS level team, a good basketball team too, but not a game that'll be widely available. Ole Miss will be hosting Louisiana Monroe, who's 2-8. That'll be on the SEC network. And finally, Texas A&M will be hosting Abilene Christie, and that is on ESPN Plus as well. We have an intern coach there with Jimbo Fisher on his way out, that the university will be paying him until 2031. A lot of guaranteed money left there. We may have one of those situations like we did with Notre Dame once they fired Charlie Weiss about 15 years ago, when they gave him a massive extension after his first or second year, and tacked on like a decade after that, then paid him to go away. So they essentially had him that they were paying, the new coach they brought in, Brian Kelly, and coach Tyrone Willington, who was there for a couple years previous to Charlie Weiss, who was still on the books as well. So they're paying 3 head coaches at the same time. So hopefully Texas A&M gets a good guy in there, and he's productive, and he doesn't leave and do something else or get fired, because they'll still be paying Jimbo Fisher for like several years, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever the amount is there. So hopefully they won't be paying him and the next guy, and then lose the next guy, and then be paying another new coach in 2028 or 9. That would just be terribly unfortunate, and just a colossal waste of money, of course. Can't pay the players, though. Bull Watch. Army will be hosting Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina is indeed bowl eligible. Grayson McCall's had some rough patches this season. He's been out with a concussion. It'd be nice if he'd be back either to finish out the regular season and or to play a bowl game at the end of the year. That would be delightful. 3-time Sun Belt Player of the Year. Only player to have that distinct honor. But they're 7-3 are the Chanticleers, and they'll be playing at Army, who's 4-6, as Army tries to make a bowl game. They're at West Point. Coastal Carolina's favored on the road. 45-point over-under. CBS Sports Network. Mississippi State also fired their coach, and they're going with an intern. Just a complete mess after the unfortunate passing of Mike Leach. And Zach Arnett there, who was promoted to head coach and was awful, and took a nice veteran team that started all seniors and juniors, had experience in a nice, comfortable passing offense, a defense that wasn't bad, and just threw it in the garbage and did his own thing, and just completely messed up this team for 10 games this year. Now to finish out, they'll have an intern coach in there, and they'll be starting that all over again as they head into a new SEC next year, all new conferences. Texas and Oklahoma will be coming. And unfortunately, this school will have to start over again, losing all these guys to graduation or whatever and a new staff. And Mississippi State will just be starting over from the bottom again. And terribly unfortunate, but it'd be nice if these guys could make a bowl game. They've got their late season cupcake on the schedule that these SEC squads schedule in. They're hosting a 3-7 Southern Miss team, but they're only favored by 2 touchdowns. But this will be buried on ESPN Plus. We do have Northwestern hosting Purdue. Purdue already bowl ineligible, of course. Northwestern 5-5, which is at least double their projected win total there. Purdue's favored, if you can believe that, in Evanston. So Northwestern's going to have to try and pull a little bit of a rabbit out of their hat here from the projections to try and make a bowl game. They play at Illinois next week. So nothing is for sure with the logjam in that West Conference in the Big Ten, where all those teams are about equal. The quarterback there, Ben Bryant, has been doing a couple things. They've played like 5 guys this year, so kind of a garbage disposal over there in Northwestern, but it's been enough to get them to 500, which is just a miracle. Finally, in this window, I have Navy hosting East Carolina. Another rough season for the Pirates, but Navy's 4-5 and can still make a bowl game. This is on ESPN News or ESPN Plus. Navy favored by less than a field goal and a wonderful 32.5 point over-under. Very juicy. Afternoon, 28 games, 10 ranked teams, 2 top 25 matchups, and they both are squeezed in my top watch category. So you'll have to figure this one out for yourself. One of them is buried on the Pac-12 network. That's the 2:30 between number 21 Arizona hosting number 18 Utah. Basically a coin flipper, but a slight edge for Arizona, 1 point. 44.5 point over under, not a whole lot here. Utah has found a quarterback, but in saying that, the offense is not good. Not good at all. They've been able to find spots in vulnerable defenses, but Arizona is not exactly that anymore. It's been quite a turnaround here for this particular squad. They did give up 31 last week to Colorado, 10 to UCLA, 24 to Oregon State. They can move the ball a bit. 6 to Washington State, 41 to USC, 24 Washington, 20 to Stanford. The point is, they do give up a few points to offenses that can move the ball a bit. They clamp down the bad offenses, and they do give up points to guys that can score. And I think Utah at this point kind of falls in the middle, still put some points on the board. It's whether Arizona with their freshman quarterback there can move the ball, and I certainly think they can. There's not a lot of stakes here for a Pac-12 conference championship. Utah, I believe, is pretty much out of it. The standings right now have Washington at 7-0, of course, Oregon at 6-1, Arizona and Oregon State both at 5-2, USC at 5-3, Utah at 4-3. USC's season has 1 game left on it because they played in week 0. So obviously it takes some Washington, and Oregon collapses. Arizona technically isn't out of it. Utah's would take some calamity. But basically we're going to have Oregon, Washington again, unless Arizona is able to pull off some miracle here. Oregon would basically have to lose its last 2 games, and Arizona would have to win them both. But still a fun football game here for a young up-and-coming Arizona team and a Utah team that, at least to some extent, is making things work on offense with a good defensive presence there. Georgia does have to go on the road to play Tennessee. Tennessee is not what it was last season, not just because they're playing some different football there, but because they're losing some games and just not as strong a roster, in part because of the quarterback position and Joe Milton. They're 7-3 now, 3-3 in conference play. Georgia looking strong, have some weaknesses of their own, of course, but Brock Bowers is back, and he's going to be very dangerous. Tennessee getting thwopped last week was not great. 2 weeks ago, they throttled UConn, which is nothing to hang your hat on. They survived Kentucky by 6. They were handled pretty easily by Alabama. They survived Texas A&M. So it's not been all roses for Tennessee once you put the whole picture together here. I certainly think that they can pose as a slight roadblock to Georgia, but it's possible the Bulldogs just run them over. 51-13 was, of course, the score over Kentucky. 43-20 over Florida. 52-17 over Missouri. Over Ole Miss. Missouri was closer, 30-21. I think Tennessee can prove to be one of those closer scores. But you always have to be on upset alert. So keep an eye for that. That's the big 3:30 afternoon game on CBS. And the Bulldogs are just sitting at 10.5 point favorites right now with about 60 points over under sitting on the board. Your channel flipping games. I have Clemson hosting North Carolina. Kind of thinking this could have been a ACC championship game as we entered the season. This was a possibility. Now we're looking at a 6-4, 3-4 in conference play Clemson team that has not been ranked in a very long time, hosting a number 24th ranked North Carolina, who's 8-2, 4-2 in the ACC, and still Clemson's favored by almost a touchdown with a 58-point over-under, so some points. Clemson's been winning a few games, and they ended up putting a nice distance between themselves and a pretty good ball club in Georgia Tech last week. Pretty good, as in they'll play in a bowl game. They won more games than you expected. They're sitting at 5-5, but they were 4-2 in conference play entering the week, which is a pretty interesting spot for that group to be in. They have some talent, but Clemson has won 2 in a row after losing 2 in a row, and they're starting to move a little bit more. The defense has pieces, but is still giving up some points. The offense seems to be clicking a little bit more. Just not an super exciting team. Hopefully Debo gets some things figured out this offseason, whether it's bringing in guys in the transfer portal or finding another great quarterback. It seems like he should be able to bring that talent in. Wide receivers, something more of the skill positions, but a lot of top teams have that problem now, whether it's Georgia, Alabama, Notre Dame. Klubnik right now is 63% completion percentage at 6.4 yards per pass. He's not going downfield. 18 touchdowns, 7 picks. He's been sacked 19 times. Will Shipley is still averaging 4.8 yards per carry, but his numbers aren't up there. Phil Maffa is out carrying him by a couple grabs there, but the yardage is significantly better, 5.7 yards, double the touchdowns, but of course his fumbling issues have been a problem. And so Clemson favored there. North Carolina, on the other hand, you have to wonder if there'd be a change there at some point with Mac Brown. They've won 2 in a row now, but one of them was Campbell. And of course the double overtime survival against Duke, and that's coming off of Georgia Tech and Virginia losses. That's just not very spectacular. And they survived Appalachian State earlier in the year. They survived Pittsburgh earlier in the year. Turned into a comfortable win, but it's just not where you expected them to be. And now they're ending the season at Clemson and at NC State. It just doesn't reflect like a team that's going to just wrap up the season with 2 more wins and go 10-2 and have a real shot at the ACC conference championship game and a good bowl spot. It's just not a team that's really looked like that this entire season, even though the defense has looked better. Drake May is 21 touchdowns, 6 picks, 65% completion, over 3,100 yards. They can run the ball better than a lot of teams. They've got 6 yards per carry for Omarion Hampton, over 1,200 yards, 13 touchdowns. He's been a real key piece to what the offense is doing. 26 sacks on the defensive side of the ball is phenomenal, but this team is just lacking at times, which is too bad, especially on the defensive end. And Drake May does not always seem to have the superhuman powers that he's had in years previous. I mean, those losses are bad. Those are bad. But this is a game, certainly a channel flipper. Clemson hosting North Carolina in the 3:30 time slot there on the ESPN main channel. We also have USC hosting UCLA at 3:30. This would be more interesting, of course, if UCLA had a healthy quarterback. They were down to like the third string guy last week, and USC, of course, still has defensive problems, managed to hang around with Oregon for a bit last week, but we know the problems that both of these teams have been suffering. UCLA might be looking to fire Chip Kelly. There's a lot of news coming out about that, a lot of buzz. They've now lost to Arizona State last week, which I didn't even note on the rundown, 17-7. Again, multiple quarterbacks out. The defense is still solid, but 17 points to beat you. The week previous to that, it was a 27-10 loss to Arizona. Just not good. Not good at all. They did beat, if you're looking at key wins for UCLA this year, it's Washington State, I guess, Coastal Carolina, Colorado. It's not great. It's not great at all, and they're losing to all the decent teams on the schedule, and they had the easiest setup out of all the teams in the conference. They do not play Washington or Oregon, which sets up very nicely for them, and they've completely blown that opportunity. The true freshman there, quarterback, does not look very good, which is very discouraging. And so they've got to try and salvage a season here, and the battle for LA showdown here, and they're not favorites. They're severe underdogs in the Coliseum there on ABC. Air Force is hosting UNLV at 3:30. On more positive stories, 8-2 is UNLV's record, 5-1 the Mountain West. Air Force favored by a field goal on the CBS Sports Network here. They're also 5-1 the Mountain West now, 8-2 overall. They've lost 2 straight now. They took a surprising blow to Hawaii last week. Very shocking there. I believe the starting quarterback's out for Air Force, which causes a little bit of disruption, certainly. But right now we have Air Force and UNLV tied for first place. This will determine, obviously, who's in first place, and the other person could fall into a tie for second. Fresno, Boise, San Jose State all could be in the mix if they get a win as well. So this is actually a very, very big critical game that could determine who actually goes to the conference championship. Air Force will follow this up with a game at Boise State to close the season, and UNLV has a little bit easier route. They'll be able to stay home, and they will be playing San Jose State. So this would just be a big victory for UNLV to really have an opportunity to win out of kind of nowhere in the Mountain West. Their quarterback there, Jaden Malava, is completing 65% of his passes, 11 touchdowns, 4 picks, 2,000 yards. They can run the ball a little bit. Defense isn't too bad of a group there. They're averaging 36 points per game. When you consider their only losses were to Michigan, 35-7, and at Fresno State, 31-24. And they did some damage along the way. They blew out Bryant. They blew out UTEP. They blew out Hawaii. They blew out Nevada. They played Colorado State close. Blew out New Mexico and Wyoming. They're in a good position to win this game and to possibly win the Mountain West. Lastly, in the 4 o'clock slot, Houston will be hosting Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State is not a huge favorite here on the roads. It's a move to a touchdown now with about a 60-point over-under on ESPN2. Houston's still trying to make a bowl game. They're 4-6. Oklahoma State obviously disappeared on the road at Central Florida last week, which ended the 5-game winning streak that they were on, which included taking down Kansas State, Kansas, West Virginia on the road, Oklahoma, very impressive. They end the season against BYU. This would be just a massive feather in the cap there for Oklahoma. For Houston, they have Central Florida next week on the road. They've lost 4 of the past 6, 3 of the last 4. The best win is UTSA, West Virginia, one of those two. But their team that's hung around against some teams. They lost to Texas by 7. They did lose to Cincinnati by 10 last week. They lost to 2 by Rice. Just a team that's certainly had its up and downs this year, but I'm not sure that Oklahoma State, particularly after just a horrible effort last week, I don't think they can expect to just blow by Houston. Donovan Smith is the quarterback for the Cougars. He played for Texas Tech last year, so he certainly has Big 12 previous experience. Notable games here. Liberty's still undefeated. They're one of the, we're still at 7 teams undefeated, aren't we? Liberty will be hosting UMass at 1 o'clock on ESPN Plus, hoping to move to 11-0, and they are now ranked, of course. So trying to continue that. James Madison undefeated, hosting Appalachian State. Appalachian State's officially bowl eligible. They're 6-4, 4-2 in the Sun Belt. And so James Madison will be trying to stay undefeated as well. They're also trying to petition to make a bowl game. There is a banning as soon as you move up to the FBS level to not make a bowl game for several years, which is pretty ridiculous, and they should be in one. There's stipulations to that, but I would hope that we would see them in a bowl game and in the championship game for the Sun Belt, because they should be. Only 10.5-point favorites. Liberty's huge favorites over UMass. I do have West Virginia hosting Cincinnati in here at 2:30, but quite frankly, I'm not sure that it's super notable or worth watching. Big 12 ESPN is where that'll be. Cincinnati's already eliminated from a bowl. West Virginia will be in one. They're 6-4. So we'll skip over that. Virginia's hosting Duke. Virginia's been frisky. That's why they're in the mix here. Duke's playing multiple quarterbacks, which is not fun. They are going to be in a bowl game. This one's 3 o'clock on the CW network. Duke's favored by 4 on the road here. This could be interesting just because freshman quarterback there, Virginia, can move around a little bit, throw the ball a little bit. It would be nice to see a little. Virginia's a team that might show a little bit more improvement in these last 2 games. So if they have a good opponent, it might be worth watching to see what you might get out of Virginia next year. Not that you're expecting some powerhouse to pop out of nowhere, but their last 2 opponents on the schedule here are Duke and Virginia Tech at home. So we might see some things maybe out of Virginia that are a little bit more frisky, particularly with Duke's struggles at the quarterback position this year. Next up, I have Notre Dame hosting Wake Forest at 3:30. Notre Dame coming off a late bye in the season. They're 7-3 hosting Wake, who's 4-6 and got to make a bowl. This will easily be watchable on NBC. Notre Dame like 24-point favorites in this one. Expected to just bash their brains in, but still, big TV date for Notre Dame coming back to prove something after 6 weeks. Tough stretch there. Just as tough as most stretches we've had all season. And Wake Forest still trying to make a bowl game. Ohio State hosting Minnesota. We expect them to bludgeon Minnesota, of course, but Ohio State injuries, slow sometimes. Minnesota trying to make a bowl at 5-5. Ohio State heavy favorites. Big Ten Network. Arizona State, again, we thought that they were letting go of the reins, getting their brains bashed in, and then they beat UCLA, who they still shouldn't have had any. They shouldn't have been in that game at all. And they get the win last week. UCLA said, here, we'll feel free to beat us. We're having our struggles. And Arizona took advantage. Arizona State did. So 3-7 hosting Oregon, who's 9-1, 4 o'clock on Fox. Of course, 24-point favorites for Oregon. It actually could be a lot higher. But 24-point favorites. So yeah, just Sun Devils. You expect Oregon to just roll in there and beat the life out of them. They probably will, but Auburn will be hosting New Mexico State at 4 o'clock as well on the SEC network. Auburn's 23-point favorites. I don't think they should be that over anyone, especially an 8-3 Jerry Kill coach New Mexico team. But that is on the docket as well. Auburn's surprisingly going bowling. They're not very good. They have Alabama next week. So keep an eye on that. Bowl watch. 2 o'clock, Charlotte's hosting Rice. Rice is 2 games away from a bowl. JT Daniels, that'd be nice to see him as a frisky quarterback at a small school in a bowl. But if they lose one of their next 2, they're just not going to be there. So that's on ESPN Plus. Rice is favored on the road. Arkansas State will be hosting Texas Tech, the Red Raiders, at 3 o'clock. Arkansas State's had a nice little resurgence after getting bludgeoned early. They're 5-5, though, not ready for a bowl yet. Texas State, 6-4. Did I say Texas Tech? I did. Texas State, 6-4. They are going to a bowl. This is on ESPN Plus. Colorado State will be hosting Nevada. Nevada's been long eliminated, but Colorado State's 2 games from a bowl. They could be eliminated Saturday. Western Kentucky, 3:30 will be hosting Sam Houston State, who has made it to 2 wins on the season. How about Sam Houston State? Western Kentucky, not bowl eligible yet. 5-5, favored by double digits on ESPN Plus, 3:30. Iowa hosting Illinois. and this is also 3:30. Again, I don't know that you're watching this. It's literally why I created a notable section. But Iowa would have to have a number of things happen to not go to the Big Ten championship game. That would include losing both of the games they have left. Don't expect that, but they're only field goal favorites against a 5-5 Illinois team that needs a win. FS1 is where this game will be played. Virginia Tech hosting NC State at 3:30. At 7-3 is NC State's record right now, 4-2 in the ACC. Virginia Tech at 5-5, 4-2 as well. It's 2.5 points Virginia Tech's way in a 44.5 point over under. Now NC State is taking MJ Morris and redshirting him. He played some last year with quarterback injuries, and he played his 4 games this year, which is the most you can play without burning your red shirt. He's expected to be the quarterback of the future. I don't think anyone's been impressive for the Wolfpack for quite a while. I think Brennan Armstrong's back in then, and they benched him for MJ Morris. The point is, they're trying things out, and it seems like they'd be disrupting the quarterback room in the roster in the meantime. So this Virginia Tech team might have a shot at a bowl game this week, if not next, when they play Virginia. Not a lot of points expected because neither of these teams score a lot, and almost a field goal line here. TCU will be hosting Baylor. Baylor will be firing their coach at the end of the year. TCU is 4-6, not much better. 2 touchdown favorites, though, trying to make a bowl. Troy will be hosting Louisiana. Troy is very good. They're playing a 5-5 Louisiana team, and they're 16-point favorites. Louisiana's trying to make a bowl. This is your NFL Network game. And that's what I got here for Bull Watch in the afternoon slate. Moving to the evening. 15 games. A little bit healthier in a few past weeks here. 8 ranked teams. 2 top 25 matchups. We're going to cram those both in to your top watches here. Kansas hosting Kansas State in Lawrence. A 16 and a 25 numbers next to their names, both 7-3. Kansas State's a game better in the Big 12, as I just ran through. 55.5 point over under. Kansas State favored by 8. And that seems about right if we can't get some quarterbacks in the field here for Kansas, which has just been horrible for their ability to move and advance as a program here. I don't know what's going on with Jaden Daniels. If he gets on the field, I believe that they can beat pretty much anyone in the Big 12. But as it stands right now, Jason Bean, I don't have any news on. And the third stringer that came in, I'm not so sure about. He didn't do a whole lot against Texas Tech. So it'd be terribly unfortunate if the season ended like this with no quarterbacks but the true freshman, Ballard to go. Again, Jaden Daniels questionable, and Jason Bean for the Sunflower Showdown against Kansas State. At 7:30, we do have Oregon State hosting Washington. Now, Washington State for the Apple Cup is on the docket for Washington the following weekend. But Oregon State, of course, now in the top 10, poses a great threat, pretty solid on both sides of the football, elite at nothing. And Washington will have an opportunity to throw on this football team, but how will they match up? That is the question. Will their defense give up points? They have to win here on the road, and I think it's underrated at this point that this team, with questions for quite a while now, has been able to make it to 10-0. I think some credit has to be given for that, but they will have to survive here against the Beavers. I guess they're ranked 12th right now. But Washington is ranked 5th, of course. This is on ABC. The Beavers are favored at home. Right now, by 2 points, this line is going to move all over. But in Corvallis, they're currently favored with the 63.5 point over-under. This is going to be one of the top games on the docket with a possible upset and a ripple through college football should this game go the other direction. 37.9 points per game for the Oregon Beavers at this point. They can run the ball almost 200 yards per game. They're decent, 20.5 points given up. Their wins again, UCLA, Colorado, it's kind of bland after that. Losses to Washington State and at Arizona. They have Oregon next week, so a big rivalry game next week for them. But it could all start here if they're able to take down Washington. DJ Ungalele is completing less than 60% of his passes, but he's not turning the ball over. Again, Martinez over 1,000 yards on the ground, 6.6 yards per carry. That's how they'll win the ball game. Control the ball. run around. 36 sacks on the season, is one of the best in the country. And that's how they get after Michael Penix. This is the must-watch game of the week, the big one on the slate, and that's the evening 7:30 ABC game. Now your channel flippers, dare you change that dial over. At 5 o'clock, I do have the Central Florida Knights going on the road to Texas Tech. Neither team is bowl eligible right now. They're both 5-5 overall. Texas Tech favored at home. This is on FS2, so it's out of the way, but lots of points expected in this one, of course. Should be an interesting, fun game there. I do have Missouri hosting Florida, simply because Mizzou has an opportunity to continue to win games, move towards 10 wins. Again, it'd be a Georgia, two Georgia losses for them to make the conference championship game. That's not going to happen. They're ranked 14th. The Missouri Tigers are. Florida's not eligible for a bowl. That'd be big problems for Billy Napier, but they're 5-5, 3-4 overall in the SEC. This is 7:30 ESPN Network. Mizzou favored by almost a dozen here with the Gators going on the road. Of course, they've got a rivalry game against Florida State next week, so 2 big games for Florida to end the season after 3 consecutive losses, so they really need to pull an upset somewhere here. 8 o'clock on Fox, Iowa State's hosting Texas. Texas favored by 7.5 on the road. Not a lot of points expected in this one. Offense supposed to be a little bit of a struggle here, but it would be horrible if Texas took another loss as far as the Big 12 reputation in its final year as it's currently comprised, the only year that it'll look like it currently does, with the new members added in and Texas and Oklahoma heading out. They might not get a representative, and it's supposed to be cold, 45 degrees in Ames, Iowa, Jack Trice Stadium, as they're doing some construction there to rebuild some facilities. I was out there not too long ago. But Iowa State could be in the mix against Texas. Keep an eye on that one, 7.5 point over under. So those are the 3 channel flippers. Notable games, LSU, let's start at the 6:30 slot here. Florida State will be hosting North Alabama for its annual walkover game late in the season here. That is on the CW network. North Alabama's 3-17. That's 6:30. Stanford will be hosting Cal at 6:30 as well. This is the Pac-12 Network Steal. Stanford's not going to a bowl game, still like their quarterback there. California's 4-6, hoping to make a bowl. They are favored almost a touchdown on the road. LSU will be hosting then at Georgia State at 8 o'clock. Jaden Daniels should be fired up, ready to go. If nothing else, ready to put big points on the board. And you can't tell me that the Heisman doesn't matter in the buzz outside of the locker room for that. They're ranked 19th. Georgia State's a good team. They're 6-4. And they can do some things, but LSU's favored by 31 points with a 71-point over-under in Baton Rouge on ESPN2. It's going to be warmer there, 72 degrees. Bull Watch. We got an avalanche of teams here to flip over to if some of that stuff's not worth keeping an eye on. South Alabama will be hosting Marshall, a couple 5-5 teams out of the Sun Belt, 5 o'clock ESPN Plus. And South Alabama's heavily favored. That's to be expected. 6 o'clock will be Georgia Southern hosting Old Dominion. Still a great passing attack there for Georgia Southern. They're going bowling. Old Dominion might not be. That's on ESPN Plus. Eagles favored there against that squad. Utah State will be hosting Boise State at 7 o'clock. Utah State, the Aggies, trying to make it to a bowl game, and Boise State is as well. Both a couple 5-5 teams. Boise favored on the road. Arkansas will be hosting Florida International at 7:30. Arkansas has a worse record than Florida International. 4-6 is Florida International. Arkansas might be looking for a new coach soon. 30-point favorites they are in Fayetteville, though. Beavertown's been disappointing this season. Cocktober was as well. South Carolina's 4-6, and they're 1.5-point underdogs at home to visiting Kentucky, who's 6-4 all of a sudden and has a losing record in conference play. But this will be squirreled away on the SEC network at 7:30. South Carolina trying to make a bowl game, and they've been feisty late in the season. Has it been sign stealing? Who knows? But we still got a former Heisman contender here, and Spencer Rattler, or at least that was the expectation a couple years back. He's still hoping for an NFL career at some point. Hosting Kentucky here. Just saying. That SEC game is on the board. Wisconsin hosting Nebraska. And again, this and the Kentucky game are borderline notable or even watchable games, but these two are 5-5 teams that have struggled, both 3-4 in conference play, trying to make bowls. Wisconsin struggled, man. They're having some problems. They're favored by 5.5 and a 36.5 point over under because the offenses suck. They've had both have been darn second or third quarterbacks at this point. Wisconsin's lost 3 straight, including losses to Indiana and Northwestern. That's horrible. Nebraska on their own right. Defense is looking better. Matt Rule's on the up and up on that program. They're actually further ahead than Wisconsin looks at this point. They still lost 2 straight. One of them was to MSU. The best win between these two teams might be Rutgers. The Rutgers win for Wisconsin. It's pretty pathetic right now. So, but these two will be battling for bowl games and Pride on NBC at 7:30. We also have Georgia Tech hosting Syracuse at 8 o'clock. Neither team is bowl eligible right now. 5-5ers here as well. Georgia Tech favored heavily at home. Syracuse has been pretty banged up. That is your bowl watch. Finally, your late night slate, little thin, couple 10:30s. FS1 will have Fresno State hosting New Mexico. New Mexico not going to do a bowl game. Fresno 8-2, 23.5 point favorites. They could win the Mountain West, but they've got to win against New Mexico first. Next week, they will wrap up the regular season against San Diego State. Brady Hoke has stated that he'll be retiring after this season, and his team's been pretty horrible. Defense used to be their calling card, and it's been a struggle for San Diego State. 3-7 overall down there with New Mexico at the bottom of the conference. But Fresno State a step behind now, Air Force and UNLV. They get a win here. They're at least tied at second place with the loser of Air Force. UNLV still in the hunt, still a good football team. Also at 10:30, CBS Sports Network. San Jose State's favored by 14.5 over San Diego State. That squad coached by Brady Hoke. And 5-5 is the record for the Spartans, still hoping to make a bowl game. The Aztecs will not be going anywhere but home for Thanksgiving. 14.5 point favorites there for San Jose. And they had a great win last week. They were favored originally, then the line moved all over the place against Fresno State, and they beat the life out of them 42-18. They now have a 4-game win streak going. Their quarterback has been doing a great job. He had 3 touchdown passes last week. They're jumped out to a 21-3 lead. They run the ball a lot more than they pass. 43 runs, 18 passes. Robinson had 200 yards carrying and 2 touchdowns. Just a great job. And they'll be on track to do it again this upcoming weekend. All right, your top watches for this upcoming weekend. Your must-watch game will be the 7:30 Washington and Oregon State. Obviously a big game. Could possibly keep Washington out of the probably not out of the Pac-12 Conference Championship game as I see it now, but out of the playoffs. That's certainly on the radar. Could catapult Oregon into having a shot at it with 1 game left in the regular season after this upcoming weekend. You're audible if you're throwing out a slate to just switch games over. The noon slate. If the Big Ten games are boring, if Louisville and Miami isn't what's promised, watch points be put up in Memphis and SMU with real stakes as both teams look to make the American Conference Championship game. That'll be a good one. So that's my audible game. Check in on Tulane again. You thought they'd been struggling at home. They go back on the road again to play Florida Atlantic, hoping to make a bowl game in a team that was feisty earlier in the season. Check in on Tulane in the afternoon. Small screen style at the 3:30 UNLV at Air Force. Again, stakes here. First place alone atop the Mountain West Conference, not where either team expected to be in the preseason. Your underrated game, several could go here. I have Texas at Iowa State at 8 o'clock. Not much is expected from Iowa State, and they're 6-4 right now, so that's understandable. I mean, they lose this, they're 6-5. Maybe they lose next week, they're 6-6 or 7-5 going into a bowl game. This was a team that's not supposed to be very good this year. Move some things around, good coaching staff still, and they can do some things. And Texas is not favored by just over a touchdown, certainly not double digits on the road here. And it's worth noting, Washington, Texas, Louisville, Georgia, Michigan, Oregon, all on the road. We've only got like 8 teams that are undefeated or with 1 loss that have a real shot to make the playoffs, and most of them are on the road this week. We expected, big games last week and big results, and not much panned out. Of course, last week of the season, we're going to get some of the big matchups, and that's going to be a big deal. But this week's kind of quietly under the radar. Lots of teams on the road. Certainly, if you're undefeated and take a loss now, that doesn't just knock you out of the playoffs. Really 2 losses is what knocks you out in the end. But you could certainly start to shrink the pool or put some possible one-and-done situations on the board heading into the last week and then conference championship games if we see some major upsets here. And they're kind of mapping out this way. Again, Washington on the road, Texas on the road, Georgia on the road, Louisville on the road, Michigan on the road, Oregon on the road, Alabama playing a cupcake. So there's certainly some table setting for that. And finally, your late night snack is your choice. Fresno State hosting New Mexico. Fresno State's the best team on the board, or San Jose State, kind of feisty, hoping for a bowl game, playing a kind of miserable San Diego State team, but Fresno is the best in that slot. That is your watch guide. Thank you very much for hanging in, and I'll chat with you later. Bye.
All my blessings, 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 all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny. Daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up and watch that beat turn into a